I never thought it would happen to me. I always considered myself a decent husband. Joe, 34, a regular guy with a 9 to 5, who's trying to be a good partner to his wife, Kelly. We met in college, and even though it wasn't love at first sight, it grew over time. We had that comfortable kind of marriage, nothing extravagant, but solid. We lived in a cozy house in the suburbs of Nashville, and for years, I thought we were doing okay. We'd have our fights, sure, but that's normal, right? I noticed small things at first, little changes in Kelly. She'd be out late a lot more than usual, coming back at odd hours. I'd ask her where she'd been, and she'd either get defensive or offer up a generic excuse like, "Oh, just work stuff," or, "Had a girls' night with the girls," but nothing ever felt right. You know that gut feeling you get? The one you can't explain, but you know something's off? Yeah, that's what I had. But I trusted her. I mean, what else could I do? You always trust your wife, right? She'd get irritated if I asked too many questions, but it was always the same answer. That was until one night, about a week ago, when everything changed. It was a Friday night. Kelly had been out with the girls again, and I was at home, minding my own business, watching TV. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, there was a package. The name on it was addressed to Kelly, but it wasn't from anyone I knew. It was from some company called Lux Lover, or something. Weird, right? But it didn't click immediately. Maybe she had ordered something online. I took the package inside, set it on the counter, and went about my night. But curiosity got the best of me. So, about an hour later, I opened it. What I found inside hit me like a freight train. It was a fancy lingerie set. The kind that looks like it's meant for something special. Something that didn't scream, "For me." My stomach twisted. She hadn't said anything about buying anything like this. Was it a gift? But for who? I immediately checked the receipt inside the box. Her name was on it. But the shipping address? It was not our address. It was some random apartment complex in the next town over. My heart started pounding. I googled the address and found out it was an apartment complex near a popular bar in the city. Kelly had never mentioned anything about moving to a new place. What the hell was going on? That's when it all clicked. I couldn't breathe. The answers were staring me in the face. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I needed to confront her. And that's exactly what I did. I waited up for Kelly that night. I don't think I slept a wink, just sat there on the couch, staring at that damn lingerie set, trying to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. She came in around 2 a.m., stumbling slightly as she closed the door behind her. I could smell the alcohol on her breath, and I could see it in her eyes. Her pupils were dilated, and she looked disheveled, like she hadn't been taking care of herself. The first thing she said when she walked in? "You're still up?" In that sarcastic tone she uses when she's trying to deflect. I didn't answer right away. I just stood up, holding the package. Her eyes immediately shifted to it, and I could see her posture tense. She didn't say a word, but the silence between us felt suffocating. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my attempts to stay calm. She stared at me for a second, blinking like she was trying to process what was going on. Then she started. "Oh, that? It's nothing. Just something I ordered for myself. You know, to feel good or whatever. I've been stressed out lately, and I thought I could, do something nice for myself." She gave a small, dismissive shrug like it was no big deal. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut, the reality setting in, suffocating me. "That's not what I'm asking, Kelly," I said, trying to hold my ground. "Why was it sent to an address that isn't ours? And why, for the love of God, didn't you tell me you were seeing someone else?" Her face immediately shifted, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, looking for a way out. She stepped toward me, her voice turning defensive. "What the hell are you talking about, Joe? Are you seriously accusing me of cheating? That's insane. You're twisting things. It's just a damn package. She was getting angry now, but there was a shaky edge to her voice that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I was onto something. I'm not twisting anything, Kelly, I snapped. I found the address. I found everything. So cut the bullshit. Who is he? She hesitated, then let out a small laugh. You really think I'd cheat on you? You think I'm that type of person? I'm just stressed, okay. And sometimes I go out, and I don't tell you every detail. You know how it is. She looked at me like I was the crazy one. The deflection, the lies, it was all there. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, of recognition, that I couldn't ignore. And then she added, almost as an afterthought, if you don't trust me, maybe this isn't working anymore. Her words hit me harder than anything else. It felt like a slap in the face. But the worst part? I didn't even know how to react. She didn't seem sorry. She didn't seem apologetic at all. I was standing there, holding the evidence in my hands, and she was just trying to twist the knife even deeper. I stood there, frozen for a second. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. Was she really doing this? Was I so blind that I couldn't see it coming? My heart was hammering in my chest, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me like a freight train. My legs felt weak, and for a moment I thought I might collapse right there in the living room. Kelly, still standing there, waiting for me to react, looked impatient. She was acting like she was in control, like I was the one who had messed up. But I wasn't the one who had lied. I wasn't the one who had been out every night, drinking, meeting some guy, hiding it all from the man who loved her. It was all starting to feel like a blur, a sickening, twisted blur. Don't play the victim here, Kelly. You're not fooling anyone. My voice barely came out above a whisper, but it was the only thing I could say. I couldn't even look at her anymore. I just wanted to get away from her, away from this lie that had somehow infiltrated my life, my home. Kelly's face hardened. You think I'm the one lying? Look at you, acting like the poor, betrayed husband. Maybe I'm not the one who's messed up. Maybe you need to take a look in the mirror, Joe. Her words cut through me, but the worst part was how casual she was about it. There was no regret in her voice, no shame. It was like she was almost proud of herself. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a mistake. This wasn't a one-time slip-up. She'd been seeing him for months. The lies, the late nights, the trips she'd been going on, none of it was accidental. It was planned. It was deliberate. I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions. Anger surged in me, followed by a crushing sadness that threatened to break me apart. I wanted to yell, to throw things, to make her feel as worthless as she had made me feel in that moment. But instead I just stood there, trying to hold it all together. I trusted you, Kelly, I said, my voice hoarse. I trusted you, and this is what you've done. All this time, you've been lying to me, to us. To our marriage. How could you? She scoffed, turning away. You don't get it, do you? I was unhappy. You're always working. You're always too busy for me. Maybe I needed something more than just a paycheck and a place to sleep. Her words stung, but they didn't surprise me. They just confirmed what I already feared. She didn't care. She wasn't sorry. She was done with me. I felt the tears well up, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry in front of her. Not when she clearly didn't give a damn about how I was feeling. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was slipping away, and I couldn't stop it. And the hardest part? I didn't know what to do next. The night dragged on in agonizing silence after Kelly's last words. I felt like I was suffocating in my own house. I couldn't even look at her anymore without wanting to scream or collapse. My mind was a mess, torn between wanting to fix everything and knowing deep down that nothing was going to be the same. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at her. She was on her phone, scrolling, acting like the conversation we just had hadn't shattered everything. The coldness between us was unbearable. I could feel the anger rising again, like a fire that had been smoldering and now threatened to consume me. But the worst part? I didn't know what to do with it. She wasn't even sorry. No tears. No apologies. Just excuses and blame. "Maybe I'm the one who's messed up," she'd said. "Maybe you need to look in the mirror." And it made me question everything I thought I knew about her. The woman I'd spent years with. The woman I thought I knew inside and out. I looked at the clock. It was nearing 3:30 a.m. I couldn't stand being in the same room as her anymore. "Pack your stuff. You need to leave," I said, the words coming out of me like they weren't even my own. My voice was firm now, finally laced with the strength I'd been struggling to find all night. There was no going back from this. No matter how much it hurt. Kelly's eyes widened in disbelief, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "What? Are you serious?" she spat, standing up from the couch and facing me. "You're just going to kick me out? After everything we've been through? You can't be this much of a coward, Joe. Don't walk away from this. Don't act like you're some perfect angel in all this." I felt my blood boil. "You've already walked away, Kelly. You walked away months ago, and I just didn't see it until now." My chest tightened with every word. "This isn't a marriage anymore. This is a joke. So I'm done. I'm done trying to fix something that's already broken." The room was silent again. She didn't say anything. She didn't even try to apologize. I could see the anger in her eyes, but underneath it, there was something else, something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Regret? I don't know. But in that moment, I didn't care. "I'll get my stuff," she said, turning and walking out of the living room. And just like that, it was over. I heard her rummaging around upstairs, throwing clothes into a bag, making no effort to hide the fact that she was leaving. It didn't take long before she came back down, her bag slung over her shoulder, her face as cold as ice. Without a word, she walked past me and out the door. I stood there in the silence, the weight of everything crashing down on me. The house felt empty, hollow. It wasn't just her leaving, it was the end of everything. The end of the life I had built. The end of all those years I thought were happy. And as much as it hurt, I knew it was for the best. I couldn't stay with someone who didn't respect me. I couldn't continue pretending that things were okay when everything had fallen apart. I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. It was like finally pulling a splinter out of my skin, a painful, messy process, but ultimately, something that had to happen. I had to move on. The truth was, I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I didn't know if I was angry, sad, or even just numb. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not anymore. I needed time to think. To heal. To figure out who I was without her. And I wasn't sure if I could ever trust again, but I knew I had to try. For myself, the next few days felt like walking through a fog. I was stuck in this weird limbo where everything around me seemed so normal, but nothing felt right. Kelly was gone, but the house still had this haunting presence of her. Her perfume lingered on the pillows. Her coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, as if she'd just forgotten to pick it up. The quiet was deafening. It was like I was living in a memory, not a reality. I went through the motions, work, eating, and trying to sleep, though I didn't really do much of that. I kept replaying the confrontation in my mind. The anger. The betrayal. The way she had dismissed everything so easily, like she was just moving on to the next chapter of her life while I was left behind, wrecked by the wreckage she'd left. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still angry. Angry at her. Angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. Angry that she had so little regard for me or our marriage that she could just walk out without even a second thought. And angry at the years I wasted thinking everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But as much as I hated her in those moments, a part of me missed her too. It was like I was mourning not just the end of our marriage, but the loss of the person I thought she was. I had invested so much of myself into her, into this life we built together. And now, I was left with a pile of broken dreams and unanswered questions. I tried to keep busy, throwing myself into work, but it was impossible to escape the thoughts. I'd catch myself thinking about her, about the way she laughed, the way she'd always grab my hand when we walked down the street. The memories hit me when I least expected them, and they hurt. Every little thing about her now felt like a painful reminder of the woman who had betrayed me. One day, I found myself standing in front of our bedroom mirror, staring at the man I had become. I didn't recognize him. I looked tired, exhausted, really, and there was a sadness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had poured into that marriage. How much I had lost in the process of trying to make her happy. I thought about calling her. Maybe asking her why. Maybe getting some closure, even though I knew that was a pipe dream. But then I realized closure wasn't something I was going to get from her. It wasn't going to come in the form of some apologetic text or an explanation that made it all make sense. It had to come from within me. And that's when I realized something that shocked me. I didn't need her to feel whole again. I didn't need her to validate my worth. I didn't need to chase after answers that would never come. I had to find a way to pick up the pieces myself. It wasn't going to be easy. Hell, it wasn't going to be quick. But I was determined to rebuild my life. I had lost my faith in her, but I couldn't let that ruin everything else. I spent the next few days clearing out her stuff. It wasn't just about getting rid of physical reminders of her. It was about reclaiming my space, my life, my peace. I didn't need to hold on to things that made me feel small or insignificant. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever trust again, or if I would ever love again. But one thing I did know, I had to take control of my own story. No one else was going to do it for me. The weeks after Kelly left were a blur. I spent my days working, keeping busy, trying to ignore the emptiness that clung to every corner of the house. At first, I couldn't bring myself to move anything around. Her things were still scattered about, her coat hanging on the hook by the door, a few shoes by the entryway, and the leftover makeup scattered across the bathroom counter. I had to face it all, day after day, like some kind of reminder that the life I thought I had was gone. But one day, I woke up and just decided I couldn't keep living in that haze. It wasn't healthy for me to keep clinging to the past, to keep mourning the person who had left me. The person who hadn't just left physically, but emotionally and mentally a long time ago. I had been holding on to an image of her that wasn't even real anymore. So I did it. I packed up her things. It wasn't out of anger, but out of necessity. I couldn't heal while I was surrounded by things that reminded me of the version of her I had lost. The longer I kept her stuff around, the harder it was to move on. I rented a small storage unit. I didn't want to throw everything away, but I also didn't want it in my life. I packed it all away, her clothes, her books, photos, even the perfume I used to buy her for Christmas. I locked the unit and never looked back. I also started going back to the gym. I'd never been super athletic, but I figured that pushing myself physically might help release some of the tension I had built up. It was a small act of reclaiming control over my body, over the parts of my life that still felt mine. It felt good, better than I expected, actually. My body started changing, and with it my mind. I began to see the importance of investing in myself, something I hadn't done in years. It wasn't just about the physical changes, though. It was about learning to be okay with myself again. I'd spent so much time being consumed by the marriage, by the idea of being Joe and Kelly, that I forgot who Joe was outside of that relationship. I needed to reconnect with who I was before her, before all the lies, the hurt, and the broken promises. I also spent more time with friends. Real friends. People who had always been there, but I had pushed away in favor of Kelly. People who didn't judge me for the mess I was going through. They just listened. They didn't try to fix things or offer advice I wasn't ready for. They just let me vent, let me express my anger and frustration without trying to make it all seem better. In the midst of all this, I realized something important. I didn't need Kelly's apology to move forward. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. And while the pain still lingered, I could feel myself getting stronger. I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. And while it was hard as hell some days, it was also freeing in a way I hadn't expected. The journey wasn't linear. Some days I still missed the woman I thought I knew. Some days I'd catch myself wondering if I could ever trust anyone again. But then I'd remember, I'm enough. I am more than the mistakes of the past. I am more than what someone else decided I was worth. And that was the first real step toward healing. I wasn't done yet. But I was on my way. I would rebuild myself. I would learn from this. And one day, I would look back on this and know that I was stronger for it. I didn't know what my future held, but I was no longer scared of it. I had been broken, yes, but brokenness can be the start of something new. And I was ready for whatever came next. Looking back, I can see how far I've come since Kelly left. It's hard to believe that, just a few months ago, I was a broken man. My heart was shattered. I felt like I had no future, no purpose. But now, I feel different. Stronger. I've found pieces of myself that I had lost somewhere along the way. There were moments when I doubted myself. When I questioned if I was ever good enough for her, if I had somehow missed the signs. But over time, I realized that the only thing I had missed was how much of myself I had given up to make that relationship work. I wasn't perfect, but I was genuine. And maybe that was the problem all along. Kelly never really appreciated me for who I was. She took me for granted, thinking I'd always be there, thinking I would always accept the lies, the excuses, the betrayal. But I wasn't just someone to be taken for granted. I deserved more than that. The hardest part of all this was accepting that people change. And sometimes the person you think you married isn't the person you end up with. Kelly wasn't who I thought she was. And that's okay. It was painful to realize, but it was also a truth I had to accept. People grow, they change, and sometimes those changes mean that relationships can't survive. No matter how hard you try. But as much as I wish it had turned out differently, I wouldn't trade the lessons I've learned for anything. If I could offer advice to anyone going through something similar, it would be this: don't let someone else define your worth. Whether it's a partner, a friend, or even family, never let someone's inability to see your value make you question who you are. The pain of betrayal is one of the hardest things to endure, but it also teaches you more about yourself than any relationship ever could. For the first time in a long time, I'm focusing on me. Not just in a selfish, self-centered way, but in a way that allows me to be the best version of myself. I'm working on my career, rebuilding my social life, and making sure that I'm okay alone before I let anyone into my life again. I'm not rushing into anything, because I've learned that the most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. I know it won't be easy. Healing never is. But I know now that I'm capable of getting through it. I'm capable of picking up the pieces, even if it means doing it alone for a while. The road ahead is still uncertain. Maybe I'll meet someone new one day, or maybe I'll stay single for longer than I expect. But whatever happens, I won't settle. I've learned to respect myself too much for that. And if I ever find love again, it'll be with someone who values me for who I am, not for who they want me to be. So, while I may have lost something important, I've gained so much more in the process. I've gained self-respect, resilience, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to truly love and be loved. And maybe, in the end, that's what matters most.